Put the women and children to bed and go looking for dinner. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now. I want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We're the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want to remind you to like and subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on YouTube. We want to get up to 400 likes for each and every show. So hit that like button, subscribe to us on YouTube, even though today's show is obviously here on CBS Sports Network. And also a programming note, each and every Monday and Thursday during the 25-26 college basketball season, Inside College Basketball Now will be coming to you with live shows at 1 o'clock Eastern. And if you can't be with us during that block of time at 1 o'clock Eastern, get with us on your commute home or on your early morning workout or your early morning walk via Apple and Spotify. We need an army with us for each and every show here on Inside College Basketball Now. And we need you to be all you can be. And in addition to those live shows on Mondays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock Eastern, Inside College Basketball Now will be bringing you exclusive additional episodes each and every week with the biggest and the best names in the sport. This week, I talked exclusively with Kansas's Bill Self ahead of the Jayhawks game on Saturday against BYU. We will hear from Bill Self later in the show. And I also talked to Michigan State's Tom Izzo. The Spartans obviously host Michigan tonight in East Lansing. We will also hear from Tom Izzo in this show. So now that we've got you set with all your programming highlights, and again, you can hear those interviews in full with Bill Self and Tom Izzo on both Apple and Spotify once you subscribe. This is a different type of show here on Inside College Basketball Now today. Now, if you follow me, obviously, on social media, you are aware that each and every Friday on X or Twitter, however you like to call it, I will release a bracket projection as of that day for what I perceive the NCAA tournament bracket to look like if the NCAA tournament started today. So today we are going to go through my projected bracket as of today, January 30th, 2026. I'm going to go through the main seeds in total. I'm also going to get into the bubble and other trends as of today if we were projecting the NCAA tournament, which is just about 44 days away, not that anybody's counting. So here you see as of today what are my top 16 projected seeds for the NCAA tournament. The number one overall seed is the Arizona Wildcats. Obviously, Arizona right now has the most quad one wins in college basketball with 9. Tommy Lloyd's team has separated itself from the pack. The number one seed that's behind Arizona is Duke. Duke has the second most quad one wins with 8 quad one wins. The Blue Devils would be the number one seed in the East region. Michigan, who is 14-1 against the top two quadrants, is the third number one seed. The Wolverines would be in the Midwest region. And then the fourth number one seed in the South region is Dan Hurley's UConn Huskies, who are chasing their third national championship in the last 4 years. We look at the two line right now. Fred Hoiberg and Nebraska represent the top-rated 2 seed in this bracket projection. And I also want to point out that Nebraska has 2 quad one opportunities in its next 3 games. Sunday at Pinnacle Bank Arena against Illinois, who's right behind Nebraska on the 2 line. And also Purdue is going to be coming to Pinnacle Bank Arena here in the near future as well. Michigan State and Iowa State round out my projected 2 seeds. On the 3 line, we have Gonzaga, followed by Houston. I'm going to get more into the Cougars here in just a little bit. The defending national champion Florida Gators are going to be on the 3 line as well as Purdue, who is right now in the midst of a 3-game losing streak. The 4 seeds right now, according to this bracket projection, Texas Tech, who is obviously coming off some big wins as of late. One last weekend against Houston. Vanderbilt out of the SEC, a surprise team under Mark Byington, also on the 4 line, followed by 2 teams from the Big 12, BYU and Kansas, that will play head-to-head on Saturday at Allen Fieldhouse. Darren Peterson on one side, AJ DeBonsa on the other. So there you have right there the top 16 projected seeds according to this bracket projection today. Now, there's a lot of different things to look at now when we break down these 16 seeds, especially when you consider the different storylines and the different alignments. We also need to look at where these teams will be headed right now in the NCAA tournament. Arizona would be the number one seed and headed out west, where Arizona would have a major geographic advantage in San Diego for the first two rounds and then in San Jose for the West Regionals. Meanwhile, Duke, a one seed, would be in the East region. That's always been something that has been beneficial for Duke throughout the years, going back to Mike Krzyzewski, going to the Final Four all those times out of the Meadowlands in northern New Jersey. Now, one thing to keep in mind, Duke, if it stays obviously as the one seed in the East, Duke would be in a situation where it would play Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games at Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C. Duke has scheduled a non-conference game against Michigan at Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C. in a game that will be played in February. So that is a built-in thing to keep in mind. Michigan in the Midwest, that would obviously be a hub in Chicago for a lot of Michigan alums to flood the United Center, where these regionals will be played for the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 for Michigan. Judging right now with no traffic, it's in the neighborhood of 4 hours from Ann Arbor to the United Center, where Michigan would again be playing in the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8. Now, UConn, out of the Big East, would be projected, according to this bracket projection, to be the one seed in the South region. The Huskies in a little bit different situation than the teams listed above and beside them, because UConn's in a situation now where UConn has fewer quad one opportunities and opportunities to bolster their potential resume for the NCAA tournament because of the fact that UConn is playing in the Big East. Now, with that said, Dan Hurley put together the best non-conference schedule in the history of UConn basketball prior to the season. And because UConn performed so well in November and December, it is bearing fruit right now when you look at the Huskies' opportunity to be a number one seed in the NCAA tournament. Look at the wins that UConn has put together compared to the top 16 seeds that I just laid out for you. UConn has victories over BYU, Florida, and Illinois on a neutral court. BYU obviously was played in Boston. The Florida and Illinois victories for UConn were games that were played at Madison Square Garden. UConn also went to Allen Fieldhouse and beat Kansas on its home floor. Those are four major victories for a team that's trying to be a one seed. Now, here's one thing I want to point out. Based on the bracket projections as of today, and I think this is a major, major storyline to keep in mind entering the NCAA tournament, Houston was supposed to be, and I've talked about this a couple of times here on Inside College Basketball Now, Houston was supposed to be the host school in the South region of this season's NCAA tournament in March. Houston relinquished that opportunity in order to have a chance to play NCAA tournament games at the Toyota Center in Houston, which is the site of the South Regionals in this NCAA tournament. That means that Houston, who I have right now on the 3 line, if Houston was to advance to the Sweet 16 and win its first 2 games, Houston would be playing a Sweet 16 game and potentially an Elite 8 game in the South region at the Toyota Center in Houston for the right to go to the Final Four. Now, this is only January 30th, but now you have to start considering the fact that the importance for UConn, or the importance for a team like Duke, to avoid the South region is incredibly important, and do everything you can to get that number one seed in the East. Because if you are now going to be the one seed in the South, you could be in a scenario where you navigate your first round game, your second round game, your third round game, and then have to beat Houston in a pseudo home game at the Toyota Center to have a chance to go to the Final Four in Indianapolis. This is a major geographic nugget to keep an eye on as we get set to set the table for the NCAA tournament here in 2026. Another thing I want to point out. There are minefields for UConn in the Big East, and this is what the Huskies are dealing with compared to other teams right now that are vying for number one seeds. Not only is UConn void of the same opportunities that teams have in the Big 12, in the Big 10, and also in the ACC now, which I think is going to get 7 or 8 teams in the NCAA tournament. Houston has the most to lose when you consider the fact, UConn has the most to lose when you consider the fact that a loss to a Big East team not named St. John's could obviously drastically affect the resume for the Huskies. Now, beyond that, a week from today, February 6th, UConn is going to play St. John's at Madison Square Garden. It is the first of 2 regular season meetings between these 2 programs who have clearly separated themselves as the 2 best teams in the Big East Conference. Not only does UConn have to win these games in order to win a Big East regular season title, but the regular season games against St. John's now for UConn have added importance because these are going to be likely, with the exception of the road game at Villanova, the only real opportunities for UConn to move the needle in terms of bolstering its efforts to be the 1 seed in the East region on Selection Sunday. These are all things that are hovering right now when you consider the teams that are vying to be number 1 seeds in the NCAA tournament. And I would even say this. If you were UConn or Duke or another team, and you told me I could be a 1 seed in the South and may have to deal with Kelvin Sampson and Houston on the other side as a 2 or 3 in a pseudo home game, or I could be the 2 seed in the East, I would much rather be a 2 seed in the East and take my chances in Washington, D.C. before I thought about going to the Toyota Center to play Kelvin Sampson and Houston for a chance to go to a Final Four. And Kelvin Sampson, if you remember, 23 years ago in 2003, was in a situation where he was the head coach at Oklahoma, and he took on Syracuse with Carmelo Anthony in Albany, and obviously came up short in the Elite Eight. Syracuse went on to win the national championship, but Kelvin Sampson has lived that. All right, Jon Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. Want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want to remind you to like and subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on YouTube. And also want to remind you that each and every Monday and Thursday during the 25-26 college basketball season, Inside College Basketball Now will be coming to you with live episodes at 1 o'clock Eastern. And if you can't be with us for those live episodes, get with us on your commute home or during your early morning workout on Apple and Spotify. We need an army with us for each and every show here on Inside College Basketball Now. And we need you to be all you can be. And in addition to those live shows on Mondays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock Eastern, Inside College Basketball Now will be bringing you additional episodes each week with some of the biggest and best names in the sport. You just heard us talking to Tom Izzo before tonight's game against Michigan. We are also going to hear from Kansas's Bill Self later in this show, heading into tomorrow's showdown against BYU at Allen Fieldhouse. If you want to hear those interviews in their entirety, catch them on Apple, on Spotify, or on YouTube, but you have to subscribe, obviously, to keep the gas in the engine moving along. Now, we are going to continue with our bracketology theme here on this show on Inside College Basketball Now, and now we are going to look at the breakdown of volume for all of the major conferences in the bracket projection that I've put together for today. So there you see right there the number of bids for my bracket projection from the major conferences in college basketball. These are the only multi-bid conferences that we have today for my projection for the 2026 NCAA tournament. The ACC checking in with 8 teams. That is double the amount of representation that the league had last season in 2025. The Big 12 only with 7 bids, but keep in mind, 6 of those 7 bids from the Big 12 are among the top 16 protected seeds. The one team from the Big 12 that was not among the top 16 protected seeds was UCF. Only 3 teams from the Big East, UConn, St. John's, and Villanova. Seton Hall has fallen out of my bracket projection. UConn, one of the 4 number 1 seeds. The Big Ten with 11 teams, it went from 10 to 11 teams for me after Indiana got the needle-moving win the other night at Assembly Hall against Purdue. Indiana now heads west for a pair of Quad 1 opportunities at UCLA and USC, respectively. UCLA will play Indiana at Pauley Pavilion on Saturday afternoon. Still no Sky Clark in the past couple of weeks for the Bruins, who has been their best defensive guard all season long. The Mountain West checking in with 2 right now for me, San Diego State and Utah State, who will play tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern on CBS, pregame at 12:30, which I will be a part of. The SEC, 1 year after having a record 14 teams in the NCAA tournament, still checking in as of today with 11 NCAA tournament teams, and the West Coast Conference with a pair, Gonzaga and St. Mary's. So there you have it. Those are the multi-bid leagues in this bracket projection. Now, I want to add a little bit more context here. The ACC checking in with 8 teams as of today, but that could obviously be shifted with a win or 2. Now, one of the teams, and we're going to get to this later in the show, that is among my first 4 out is Virginia Tech, and I think Virginia Tech on Saturday may have more to gain than any other team in college basketball. Virginia Tech is going to host Duke on Saturday. A win over the Blue Devils would give Mike Young's team another Quad 1 win. The Hokies only have 1 against Virginia. If Mike Young can stay on course and have wins in his back pocket against Virginia and Duke, could go a long way from now until Selection Sunday. 2 other teams I'm keeping an eye on in the Big 12, who is projected right now to have 7 teams. West Virginia and TCU. TCU has been as mercurial a team as I have covered this season. Opened the season with a home loss to New Orleans, suffered the epitome of brutality, lost games at home by a close margin against Michigan, against Notre Dame, also lost home games to Arizona and Houston, but then on a neutral court in San Diego, beat in back-to-back situations Florida and Wisconsin. TCU is going to have opportunities in the Big 12, but a very, very up-and-down team right now. The Big East, with 3 teams out of its 11 in its conference. As I mentioned, Seton Hall has fallen out of my bracket projection. It's hard to see any way, unless a team came from nowhere and won the Big East tournament, which is highly unlikely, in my opinion, with UConn and St. John's in the league, for the Big East to have better than 3 teams in the NCAA tournament. The Big East had 5 teams in the NCAA tournament last year. One of them was Xavier, who went to the first 4 in Dayton and beat Texas under Sean Miller. 2 years ago, though, the Big East also only had 3 teams in the NCAA tournament, UConn, Marquette, and Creighton. But this could be a situation now for the Big East where twice in a 3-year stretch, the league only gets 3 of its 11 teams in. The Big Ten has 11 as of today, along with the SEC, a double-digit, bid league. So those 2 conferences that are always seem to be in the epicenter of everything that's happening with college athletics right now have unequivocally a path to getting double-digit representation in the NCAA tournament. The Mountain West has had multiple teams in the NCAA tournament every year since 2017. It will be interesting to see just how many this league that always seems to find a way. How many bids can the Mountain West get? San Diego State and Utah State, to me, look in good shape. I still think San Diego State needs a little bit more meat on the bone in terms of its resume. Tomorrow is a huge opportunity for the Aztecs on the road at Utah State. And another team to keep an eye on is New Mexico under Eric Olin, who didn't inherit anything when he took the job in Albuquerque, other than the recommendation to a good Mexican restaurant from Richard Pitino with the best chips and salsa in Albuquerque, because that cupboard was beyond bare for Eric Olin when he went from UC San Diego to New Mexico. But he is doing right now one of the great coaching jobs in college basketball at the non-power conference level. New Mexico, to me, still has some more work to do to be an at-large team to the NCAA tournament, but here's something to keep an eye on. Between now and the end of the regular season, New Mexico will have a combined 3 games against San Diego State and Utah State, the 2 teams that currently I have projected to be in the NCAA tournament out of the Mountain West. So the Lobos here, who again lost 4 of their top 7 scorers from last year's team that won a game in the NCAA tournament, and obviously one of those players was Donovan Dent. The Lobos still have a chance, in my opinion, to go to back-to-back NCAA tournaments. More on the West Coast Conference later. Welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. I'm Jon Rothstein. I'd like to thank, obviously, Bill Self and Tom Izzo for joining Inside College Basketball Now this week. And you can hear both of those interviews in their entirety on Apple or Spotify or YouTube. And also a reminder that Inside College Basketball Now will be coming to you each and every Monday and Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern during the 25-26 college basketball season. We need an army with us for each and every show here on Inside College Basketball Now, and we need you to be all you can be. Now let's cap off this bracketology segment of the show as we've been obviously going through my projected bracket as of today for the NCAA tournament, and it wouldn't be late January getting ready to go into February and early March without talking about the bubble. So let's go right now into my last 4 in for my bracket projection as of today. If you want a written component for this, I have posted it on my Twitter account. I do it every single Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern. The last 4 in for me for my bracket today: St. Mary's, USC, Texas, and Indiana. The St. Mary's resume is pristine in the sense that there is not a lot of bad losses, so the numbers, the metrics, the net, everything is really good. The only real win of teeth I'm seeing right now for the Gales is a neutral site win over Virginia Tech in the Battle for Atlantis. That can change for St. Mary's, who will visit Gonzaga on Saturday. Remember, this is the last season that both Gonzaga and St. Mary's are obviously going to be members of the West Coast Conference before the Zags go to the new Pac-12. USC, under Eric Musselman, got a huge win last Sunday on the road at Wisconsin. USC, in my opinion, and it's a shame, and I know that injury is a part of the game, but if Rodney Rice, who played last year at Maryland and was an integral part of that team that went to the Sweet 16 under Kevin Willard, if Rodney Rice, who was averaging about 20 points a game, did not have season-ending shoulder surgery, I think that USC could have been a Sweet 16 team this year under Eric Musselman. Texas under Sean Miller, I know there's a lot of losses for the Longhorns, but the wins to me are overriding that. Texas has won games recently at Alabama. Texas has also won a game at home against Vanderbilt, was the first team to beat Vanderbilt. One of the positives about being in a league like the SEC, you have a lot of opportunities. One of the negatives about being in a league like the SEC, you're also in a situation where, for all intents and purposes, you are not going to have any get-well games in the conference. And I have Indiana as my last team in this bracket because the Hoosiers were able to get the win earlier this week against Purdue at Assembly Hall. Indiana at UCLA Saturday in Westwood. The first 4 out for my bracket projection today. We are going to start with Virginia Tech out of the ACC, and I talked about this earlier. Virginia Tech may have as much to gain on Saturday as any team in college basketball. The Hokies will host Duke in Blacksburg. Obviously, a massive opportunity to get a quad 1 win at home. Blue Devils have only 1 loss this season. That's the Texas Tech at Madison Square Garden. New Mexico under Eric Olin, also just outside my cut line. Numbers are good for the Lobos. The Lobos also, we have to remember, won at VCU, beat Santa Clara on a neutral court, but I need a little bit more teeth on a resume that does look pretty good from a numbers and a resume perspective. Some of the losses, too, for New Mexico, not terrible. Nebraska at Boise State. New Mexico State, not great, and also a close one to San Diego State. Seton Hall a team that's just outside the bracket as well. Pirates have not had a couple of good weeks, won the other night against Xavier. And Santa Clara is also an interesting team out of the West Coast Conference. Now, Santa Clara under Herb Sendek has been an incredibly consistent program. 4 straight 20-win seasons. Broncos have put multiple players in the NBA, but under Herb Sendek, this program has never reached the NCAA tournament. How does it happen, especially if it's so difficult to win the West Coast Conference tournament with Gonzaga and St. Mary's? Santa Clara has already beaten St. Mary's once this season. Santa Clara cannot afford any bad losses, and Santa Clara also has to be in a situation where it wins a couple of more games against Gonzaga and St. Mary's and maximizes those opportunities. One thing that could really come back to hurt Santa Clara, there is a loss to Loyola Chicago, who is just having an abominable year in the Atlantic 10. That, to me, is the 5-pound dumbbell around the ankle for Santa Clara. But you know as well as I do, this is only January. Would like to thank everybody for tuning in. We'll be back on Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern on YouTube. A busy week on the CBS Family Networks and a busy weekend, obviously. Games tonight on CBS Sports Network, tomorrow on CBS. I'm Jon Rothstein, and this was Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network.